travel expenses and things like that. So these are much better to have a shorter time frame and make it a lot faster like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, marketing has to be done 1-2 max weeks beforehand, and you need to try and create that urgency with people as well, and you will actually see an increase in your registrations if you start to take on that method.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also here as well, just in terms of pre-production and planning for your event, you've got your email marketing, your topics, your times. Obviously, we know you need to make your topics quite catchy and understand your audience before you are sending out those invitations. But I also think it's important at this stage to align your presentation with your presenter. And the reason I say this is we've had experiences before, and I'll tell one short story, of a time when we had probably like 300 or 400 registrations on a partner webinar, and they got on and they were just abusing the presenter, and the presenter wasn't talking about anything that was advertised. So they had a webinar organizer within the organisation who put together this email and this branded page, and she even had the learning level there as advanced, and this presenter got on and he was talking about something completely different because he wasn't aligned with the content.
Oh,
so
no.
I think I know, and this poor guy was online, and I think a lot of the time organisations go out there, they get excited, they put together a plan, they're like, oh, you can present this, without actually pulling everything together and making sure that it's actually a package for people. So then when they do get online, it's like, I know what I've registered for, I know what I'm going to take away, what learnings I'm going to get out of it. So what's the presenter going to talk about?
Well, like we were saying, like it's so important to have those expectations correct.
Yeah.
And that's going to help with conversion as well.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, if people, if they know what they're signing up for, they turn up, they get what they expected.
Yes.
There's a good chance that they're going to do more business with your company.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And like we said earlier, we run the Redback Report on an annual basis, and we'll be doing that in February. So we go out there and get people's feedback on their experiences. And so many people said the number one thing when it comes to a presenter is them getting online and being salesy or talking too much about themselves is one way for them to log off.
Yeah, straight away.
Yeah.
Because some webinars I actually log on to, and like there's 20 minutes where the person tells their whole life story.
Oh, I know. And it's like, well, I know who you are. I probably stalked you on LinkedIn before we got on here.
Yeah, people wouldn't sign up if they didn't know who the person was. So then that's a waste of 20 minutes. And then there might be like 15 minutes of content and then probably half an hour of pitch.
Yeah.
It's like, come on. Yeah. Like, that's an hour of my life I won't get back ever again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have spoken about marketing, but I think we should speak a little bit just quickly about the marketing plans and how you need to build and nurture those people as opposed to just sending them an email for every single webinar. It's like, what are you doing in between that phase?
So with our business, we try and we really want to make sure that we're not just sending people invitations and stuff all the time.
Yes.
And so sometimes we'll even send just an email with some tips. We won't have a call to action, which is, like if you go back 5 or 10 years, that was like a no-no. It's always have a call to action in every email. Yeah. But we're finding now that it builds a lot of trust if you just send emails without always asking for something in return.
Yep.
And then when you do, it's kind of like that Gary Vaynerchuk book, like jab, jab, then a right hook.
Yeah.
So, a few more jabs in there and rather than just going for the right hook all the time and asking for the call to action.
Yeah.
So we found that's been quite effective with open rates and with engagement with our audience rather than just pitching every single time.
Yeah. And I think for these webinars, what you'll actually find when you do sort out a program, you'll build this network and this community, and people online start to get to know each other. They type in questions as well, and they start chatting to one another. And we've been running our business skills series for 4.5 years now. And people who were on the first webinar still attend to this day, and they don't attend everything, but we're constantly sending them guides and emails and, like you said, tips and white papers in between that time. So we're not just sending them webinar invitations, we're nurturing them through so they can actually be part of what we're trying to achieve, which is our online amazing community.
Yeah, and the thing is, people like to consume it in different content.
Yes.
So sometimes, I haven't got time to watch a whole 1 hour webinar, but I'd like to watch like a 5-minute, read the 5-minute PDF summary.
Yeah.
But to get the most engagement, like if you find that your audience is sitting there watching the whole webinar for the hour or the half an hour, that's the best form of engagement you can get.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So here are some tips, and we will be sending a copy of the slides and the recording within the week. But also, if you go down to the resources folder on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a link there to the Redback Inspiration Hub. So if you click there, you can actually go and download that Redback report that we were just speaking about, as well as some other guides on how to host your events. And I think there's ones particular to how-to marketing in there as well. So, if we look at this as a whole, Rob, it's quite standard for any sort of marketing event. You've got your passive marketing, so maybe using your social media pages really passively on your website. A lot of people I'm seeing now actually have a page dedicated to webinars on their website, upcoming events, which is good.
That's a great thing because you just don't know what people are interested in.
Yeah.
And having those different topics really helps you segment, okay, what are people interested in? Like we might run one on public relations, and that gets a completely different audience if we want to run on LinkedIn marketing.
Yes.
So we're finding that just very different topics are attracting different segments of our community.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then once you've got that, you might have that 1 month beforehand in the background. I think email signatures are a great way to advertise this. We change ours every single month depending on what we're promoting, and a lot of the times it is webinars.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, I think it's good just to have a link, and then people, how many emails do you send a day?
We send 50, 100 emails. Every person in our team's doing that. So having that would be a great way of getting more sign-ups.
Definitely.
That's a smart play.
And then you've got the social marketing, which you were talking about. Do you want to talk a little bit about remarketing when you're running online events and how that's worked for you?
Yes, that's worked really well. So what we find is that quite often people might click on the link to register for the webinar, and for whatever reason they just don't register. So there's always you never get 100% opt-in rates. It just doesn't work. The world doesn't work that way. If you're doing well, you might get 50, 60, 70. And so those other people, what we normally do is have a remarketing. It's called a pixel. I'm not sure if people have heard of that before, but we put a remarketing pixel on that landing page. And so if people don't register, then we kind of stalk them around the internet and try and get them to register at a later stage.
Yeah, and I'm sure many people have been on there searching a holiday or something, then all of a sudden, when you're online, you see all these ads for holiday destinations. It's like, oh, how clever!
It's it's kind of it's not a coincidence, isn't it? Yeah. So that's been very, very effective for us. We find that remarketing and retargeting is quite often the lowest cost form of advertising that you can use because people have already seen your brand.
Yes.
And so then it's a lot less expensive to get them to come back and to register at a later stage. So that's worked really well for us. Yeah, and the retargeting is very good because now it can be on the Google Display Network, which is millions and millions of websites around the world, but also the Facebook platform has retargeting built into it.
It does,
so it's very good.
Yeah. So I think, if you are launching into these types of events, don't neglect the social side of things. But I think if people don't actually have a social presence online, is this something to start with? Is this a way for them to get in there and test the waters with social marketing?
Well, I believe just advertise. I mean, even if you haven't got a good presence, you can set up a page in 5 minutes and you can advertise. So you don't need to have 1 million fans to make this work. You can have no fans.
Yeah.
And just run ads, which is fantastic. You've never been able to do it before. You always had to build up a following and then advertise the following.
That's what I think most people would assume, wouldn't they? That you have to have this amazing online presence before you actually do this, but you don't.
No, just run ads.
Yeah,
just
run them.
Money. Plot the credit card.
Yeah, and then we talk about direct marketing, which we spoke about, those emails beforehand, and nurturing your community. Now, I just want to go quickly into live production before we get to the Q&A and speaking about how to measure your return on investment. And I think everyone needs to get familiar with the platform that they're using, even as an organiser. And these platforms, you don't have to be really tech savvy. You don't need to be a CTO to be able to operate these types of platforms. They're meant to be easy. There are a lot of platforms out there that don't even have software, so you don't have to download anything, and your attendees don't have to download anything.
That's even better. Those ones we have to download software and plugins.
Yes,
and,
I know.
Yeah,
Can
get
be
a lot
crazy.
of support questions for those.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I think it's really, really important to understand the platform and what you're working with before you start to work with your presenter and build your content and your format, because there's so many things that you can do in a platform. If you look at a webinar platform, you've probably got about 15, 16 different features you can use, and most webinars I run, we probably use 2 of the features. We use a slideshow and we use a survey and the chat box, so there's 3.
And that's about, for 99% of the time, that's all you need. Now, it's good to have those features, don't get me wrong, but most of the time, if you just get the basics right, like they say in football, be brilliant on the basics.
Yeah, and don't try and be too fancy, because you need to think of it from your participants' experience. And it's easy to be online and present and be like, oh, I want to use this, this and this, but then, well, as a participant, and you just mentioned that, people learn in different ways, and some people are really visual and some people are really audio, and as a participant, I'm watching your slides, I'm reading your slides, I'm typing in the chat box, I'm seeing what other people are doing in the chat box. You might have a webcam, so I'm seeing a visual of you, and I'm listening to you. And that's a lot to have to do for someone on the other end.
Oh, yeah.
And if you try and get too fancy with polling, for example, so you can actually poll your audience on all of these platforms. If you do 20 polls through a webinar, people are just going to get over it.
Oh, you know, 1 or 2 is plenty.
It has to be relevant, doesn't it?
That's right. And I feel that you can overdo the technology. It's like, oh, this is a cool little feature. This is a shiny new object. But it's like, you know what? Have a good message, present the message well. Use the relevant features to make it, enhance it. But the main thing is that message.
And I think one important thing, if you do take away from here and you are going into this sort of these sort of platforms, is to try and use in-room surveys. So a few platforms out there have an in-room survey. So it's collecting feedback from your audience and then obviously tailoring your programs moving forward and getting that feedback. If you run a webinar or a webcast and you send an email afterwards with a link to a survey, you're not going to get a great response rate. You can actually have the survey built inside the platform. So while people are in there, they can actually fill out the survey and you get those responses immediately. So I think that's really important to collect that feedback, but make sure you do something with it.
Well, like you mentioned, you've been on these for 4 years now, so it's and make sure you guys fill out the feedback form at the end of this as well. So that's very important.
That's a nice little segue.
And the thing is, it's like it's important to have that feedback because you know you might just run these and then over time, less and less people attend, or they're engaging less. But if you didn't have those survey questions, you wouldn't know why.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know why not. So it's just like, what's going on with these stats? And then it's too late because you've lost